This is 40K Today. So much 40K news, we'll need a manta to carry it all.
Welcome to 40K Today. This is your daily 15-minute news, views, and interviews show that covers the whole hobby of Warhammer 40,000. It's Feel Good Friday, June 26th, and I'm your host, Paul Murphy. In this episode, we'll get mysterious with the cold open stories. We reveal the results of this week's poll, and I will poetically wax on about this model of the day. Let's get to those results. By a margin of 33%, people think assault armies are faring a lot better with what we know about 40K 9th edition. Is this true, or is this just a little bit of wishful thinking? Assault has been tricky to get right. I'm incredibly hopeful. Cold Open Stories hangs out with John Damaris. He brings us the deets on their new shared campaign experience.
Joining me today is the one and only Colin DeGraff, who is with Cold Open Stories, and they've got a bit of an announcement. Colin, do you want to fill the listeners in on what you guys have brewing over at Cold Open Stories?
Well, for sure. So what we've done is we've recently announced Inquisitor Doctrina Malum, which is a unofficial, immersive, collaborative fiction project set in the universe of Warhammer 40,000. And with this project, listeners, audiences, everyone can join in and assume the role of a aspiring Inquisitor and interact with different members of their Ordo, catalog, activities, and missions, all done under this tapestry of creative fiction.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So then you guys, can we talk a little bit about how it sort of works? Because it sounds really, really cool. Basically, anybody can tell their own story and it will plug into the greater overall narrative. Will there be like guidance or anything like that?
Yeah, so the best way to explain it is people who are a fan of, Dark Heresy or Inc. 28, this is the sort of setting that we're operating in. But it's being structured kind of like those alternate reality RPGs, like the SCP Foundation, where pretty much you are joining a different Ordo, one of the three Majoris, and you are then going to be given prompts, which are done as missions. They are voice-acted, effectively mission briefs, and you go out and conduct an activity. And this could be, writing a psych assessment on a low-level psyker, or it could be that you are writing the history of a Xenos artifact or technology and the history of how it changed from one hand to the next.
Oh man, this sounds so cool and a little nerdy, but that's okay. That's where we live, right? So.
I mean, it's the best thing about it that we're really looking forward to is that there's going to be this great interplay of fully produced voice acting recordings, and that's something we've been doing for over a year, is these high production value audio dramas for 40K. And with this, you'll be able to kind of interact with these different Inquisitors. For people who have, were a fan of old Westwood Studios, games like Command and Conquer, those full motion videos where you have someone talking directly to you, it's going to be in the same vein of that, but done with a very unique 40K style. And we're just looking forward to taking people on a dark and perilous journey where, with what they write, they can also, help advance and influence the story.
That's cool. So then will you guys be taking listener submissions or running a contest around it or that kind of thing?
So each month, what will happen is people will submit. They'll only have one brief window to submit their mission activities for the month. And again, that could be writing about a historical event, or maybe they're given a document and they have to rewrite it to match the propaganda of that particular Ordo. And when people submit them, we would be screening on the back end. We're looking at different tracking systems to award people for these submissions. And then what we do is we plug them into the system, the Doctrina Malum, which is, again, kind of like an open source tome of all of the stories and entries.
Okay, so then if other people are kind of interested in someone else's work, they'll be able to find it, and you guys will basically be the intermediary, I guess? Is that how
we are effectively the acolytes, of the Inquisition. We're helping curate the experience, but there are three unique characters who are fully voice acted, and again, the advantage for 40K is that, sometimes there are multiple versions of the same event. So some stories will have different versions. Some we may only select one or two. So it's going to be based on that particular mission.
Okay. So basically, as you get really good stuff, you're going to feature and highlight it, right? And not that anybody's work is bad, but obviously we're going to highlight the cream of the crop and the really exciting stuff. And I think that'll be really, really cool.
Exactly. And as the fiction collection grows, there's going to be more opportunities for, shared collaboration or dissension, different works being, more popular than others, or people saying, I like that, but let's, take a stab at it. And even the entries will kind of start dialogues with each other.
Okay. So then in a lot of ways, the people participating in this are actually going to help sort of steer the ship in a lot of ways, right? Because you guys will be taking, it sounds like, feedback as you go along, and the things that are the most popular or things that may be repeated or similar things. Does that make sense? Is that what I'm...
And they are, because again, you as a participant are a member of one of the Ordos. You'd be choosing between Xenos, Malleus, and Hereticus, and you can choose which Inquisitor you want to kind of go with their story. And we do have some story arcs that are tied in, but with the activities they do, that the audience does, it's going to help flesh out the world.
Okay, very cool. Well, what we'll do is we'll put some links to Cold Open Stories in the show notes, like we always do.
Mm-hmm.
And if people have more questions, where should they go to find out more information? I know it hasn't gone live yet, and that's a little ways out, but...
Well, we do actually have a landing page that will explain everything about the process. We have a trailer. We also have one of the missions as a clip that you can watch. You can head over to coldopenstories.com and click on the Experience tab.
Perfect. Thanks so much for your time, Colin.
No problem. Thank you.
Get those Imperial mandates ready, folks. Check out Cold Open Stories if you haven't already.
Today's episode of 40K Today is brought to you by Frontline Gaming. Frontline Gaming is a one-stop shop for all your Warhammer hobby needs, discounted products, American-made gaming mats and terrain, and a full line of miniatures painting service and daily hobby content. And this can all be found at frontlinegaming.org.
Playing 40K is hard. We make it less hard with some cool coaching tips. Let us know what you want to hear about. And while we wait for those suggestions to come in, take a listen to what we got for you right now. Hey everybody, welcome to the coach segment here on 40K Today. I'm joined this afternoon by Tj Lanigan.
Hey everybody, how we doing?
Yo man, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Art of War coach, creature caster champion, great player.
Oh yeah. Hey, thanks.
Yo man, welcome. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the movement phase or moving models in general. Most people can't win a game without doing it at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a crucial phase, something you need to get correct and kind of figure stuff out.
Do you have any thoughts about how you approach that? Is there some things you can do, some discipline you can maybe impart onto us?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big advocate of basically explaining to my opponent my intentions, what I'm trying to do in my turn. It just makes it makes the turns just easier. Then you're not like struggling about explaining to your opponent like, well, I meant to do this and then this happened and now we're not doing that, and then we're just on the same page. That works out a lot better for me.
That helps.
Other stuff is just, practicing the movement phase to make sure that you're maximizing your movement phase. You got to figure out where your models, you got to get like a visual game plan every turn where your models are going to end up. That's important to just know that like, hey, they're going to, I'm going to start here. And then this is what the goal of that movement is.
How do you feel about, pre-measuring it out? Do you feel like you have to measure every single model? Do you have to do that? What are the critical things, especially if time is an issue for you?
I find that it's not too bad. I can pretty much, I've never had an issue where I'm pretty, like when you play a ton of games, you get really good at eyeing stuff up and being like, okay, well, that looks like it's in range. So
yep.
Once you get good at that skill, that will definitely help you out doing a lot of other stuff that you previously had trouble with. And I feel like that speeds up a lot of your turns as well, because you're just able to kind of get that faster movement, that faster turns in.
Well, as boring as it sounds, you can actually do this on your own. Like you can set up these scenarios when you are in between games, when maybe you're not out there playing a game or don't need to be in the thick of it. You can kind of make this stuff routine to yourself by getting the idea, putting out the tape measure. What is the movement of this? What is my overall threat range of things? You can do that on your own table without the assistance or involvement of anyone else.
Oh yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, like, I think building, like list building in the comfort of your own home, like tactically playing out, okay, this is what that list looks like. This is what that list does. That stuff is super, super important. I don't think a lot of people really take that stuff seriously, I guess. They just think, well, it's a list and it's gonna do what it's gonna do. But like, I don't get to play as often as I'd like to. So that's those are my practice games. That's how I really develop the strategies.
Actually putting the models on the table.
Yeah, actually figuring out like, okay, this is what it needs to do. This is how my spacing looks and things like that. Those are all very important things that I think a lot of people just don't do because they're like, it's lame. I don't want to do that. That sounds boring.
Well, you talk about spacing too, but putting a full squad out on the table in unit coherency, and we don't know if that's changing in any way, in ninth or whatever. But unit coherency with a string of 40 millimeter bases in a 10 model unit will get you a real big chunk of real estate on the table.
Yeah. And then that's also important for, like, we talk about, taking units and kind of putting them on the table is like that the real estate that a full unit, like, you don't understand how big a full unit of like a 20-man unit of possessed is unless they're on the table and you're like, oh, so this is what this looks like. This is how this works, because you don't have any kind of reference to go by until it's on the table. And you don't understand like 2-inch coherency.
You may not have thought that you could claim 2 objectives at one time. Or
2
something.
objectives. I've claimed like 3 objectives with 1 unit. It's pretty crazy.
Right.
I definitely, have experienced some pretty crazy stuff with 1 unit. And it's, it's the same thing with plague bears and things like that. Like once you get the experience of doing it, that's when it becomes like, okay, I know what to do now with this unit.
So I like the idea what you said about visualizing your game plan. How does that now, and still in the same context of moving models, how does that play into the fact of things like in the combat phase, in the assault phase, and in the consolidation and stuff? Like how do you find, or what are some tips or tricks you have about visualizing how that works?
Combat phase, in 8th edition anyway, the combat phase, and this is going to change in the new edition, but like you have to have a generalized goal, and that goal cannot just be like, I want to kill everything. I want everything to die in this combat. It's got to be like, my goal this turn is to maybe hit this unit, but then maybe wrap this unit behind it so that unit can't escape. Then I can't get shot this turn. Or maybe it's like, I want to kill this unit and then overrun onto this objective, or I want to overrun and touch this enemy unit so that it can't shoot next turn. It's got to waste its fallback and then it doesn't get to fire on me. There's a whole bunch of different, like, I think the combat phase is probably the second most important phase in the game. Like, movement is super important, but the combat phase gives you all of these extra. It's basically like a second movement phase, especially if you're playing it right. Oftentimes I have charged in one direction and ended up, spreading my models out in a completely opposite direction to grab an objective so I could score an extra point, or I could hold more. Or I realized looking down that my characters aren't in a protective shell of bodyguards. And I'm like, uh-oh, that's a problem. Well, I'll use the charge phase to basically move those models around so that now I have basically something surrounding my models to block those guys. So it's super important that you understand how to get the most out of it.
I like that, man. So if I had to sum up, and you're basically talking about looking at things in multiple dimensions, and what is the real goal? The goal not just to get from point A to point B. It's focused on how to complete the objectives, how to
definitely
shield your characters.
Chess.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically super nerdy chess. I mean, like you got to think turns ahead. You got to think end game. Like, there will be turns where you won't score the points that you thought you were going to be scoring, and there are other turns where you're like, he scored 4 points on me, I only scored 1 point. But to not get discouraged and understand that, like, there's an end game or there's a goal at the end of the game, and that is ultimately so you can win the game. Take those hits all according to plan.
Heck yeah, man. Well, thanks for coming on. I'd love to talk to you again sometime.
Yeah, of course, man. Thanks for having me.
Have a good night.
Yep, you too.
Thanks a lot for that. Remember, Warhammer, like football, is a game of inches. Before we launch you into the weekend, it's time for our model of the day.
It's the model of the day, the model of the day, the model of the day.
Today's model of the day is an Alaris Shield Captain, brought to you by the Emperor's New War Gear on Instagram. All one word on that one if you want to check it out. They say they're proud of this model, and they should be. This has a deep, almost onyx look to it with some vibrant reds, A truly, in my opinion, original take on this Alaris Shield Captain. Please check it out. Please use that hashtag 40K today if you want your models featured on this show. We look forward to seeing them. And that brings this week to a close. Thanks for joining us. A big thanks to the crew, Alex Boehner, Tanya Gates, and Seamus Ronan for all the work that goes into putting this thing together. Don't forget to check out our recap show. It's the best of from everything that happened this week. We'll see you next week. Tune in every day for your daily dose of 40K awesomeness. My name's Paul Murphy. This has been the 40K Today team. We'll see you soon.